Micah's from Oxfordshire, England. Please welcome to the podium photojournalist Mike Sheil.
Congressman, Mayor, trustees, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. I am very honoured to be here today. It's an emotional experience for me because this has been a long journey. And I'm very touched by the faith of the trustees of the museum who have created this exhibition, and they've also sent it to Europe. And it's fulfilling its purpose in bringing the story of the First World War and American involvement in that war to a much wider public than represented here. The exhibition is always presented out of doors because the idea is that it should be seen by people who know nothing about the First World War, probably have no interest in it. They're going about their everyday life and they come across the exhibition. So to have it here is an absolutely ideal place. Now, today is Memorial Day. It's the day when your nation remembers the men and women of your armed forces who've died serving their nation. It's indeed a day for remembrance, but if we only remember those men and women who've died purely because they died, we are failing them. We need to celebrate their achievements, because otherwise we render their sacrifice as absolutely meaningless. It's really important that we must ensure that we do not forget the ideals for which they fought, the freedoms they sought to preserve, the hopes they had for their future, should they survive the conflicts in which they died. If we neglect those ideals, forget that vision, then we render their sacrifice as totally meaningless. There was a British veteran who fought on the Somme, the big British battle of 1916. 500,000 men, British and Germans, were casualties or died in that battle. And as he left the battlefield, he looked at it and he said, they were everywhere. They would not be lonely. There were too many of them. I saw that bare country before me, the miles and miles of torn earth, the barbed wire, the litter, the dead trees. But the country would come back to life. The grass would grow again, the wildflowers return, and trees where there now were only splintered skeleton stumps. They would lie still and at peace below the singing larks. They could not feel lonely. They would have us. Though we were going home and leaving them, we belonged to them and they would be part of us forever. That is a soldier's vision. He believed that future generations would live in a better world, but they would never ever forget those who had given their tomorrows for our today. In our uncertain world today, we really need to reflect upon those men and women. There's an old saying, those who do not learn their history are condemned to relive it. And all too often, I feel that the First World War and its history and its consequences is today all too often forgotten by the people of America. I think the part that America played in that war, in that first global war, there were over 50 countries involved in it, is one of which your nation should be immensely proud. Maybe it's dangerous to suggest it, but I do not think in 1917 that you were truly a nation. The reason I say that is that in the 15 years prior to your entry into the war, you had had somewhere in the region of 27 million immigrants. a mass influx of people. You were indeed the home to the poor and the needy of the world. You welcomed them into your country. And in 1917, you were faced with the prospect of declaring war and looking at a population which was not really American. Indeed, about 10% were Germans. This was a massive problem. You had an army of only 120,000 men, and you were separated from the scene of war by an ocean. Now, when war was declared, you brought in the draft, millions, hundreds of thousands of men joined up. Your immediate problem was quite simple: where to house them. And when you think that Kansas City today is a population of, I believe, about 450,000, you were building camps for half that population in fields. An extraordinary outburst of energy was required from the whole nation to prepare you to go to war. And that is exactly what you did. When you look at it, you actually put 1.2 million men into battle within 15 months of declaring war. That is the most extraordinary feat. It took the British about 6 months longer to create a smaller army, and we had a much stronger military tradition than you did. So what you did in the First World War in your terms of mobilization and your commitment to that war is something of incredible credit. But there's something else I'd like to touch on, which is almost entirely forgotten. It's mentioned here in the exhibition, and this is one of the great things about this museum, is that it does seek to tell a story, and a forgotten story, about not just American involvement, but the involvement of other nations. It's very outward looking. And one of the things that you did during the First World War was you supported a thing called the Belgian Relief Fund. Now, I'm not going to ask how many of you know about it, because I suspect not very few, just a handful. But the Belgian Relief Fund fed the population of Belgium and northern France for 4 years during the war. Quite remarkably so, because the food had to be transported across battle lines. The British Navy was blockading the European continent. So the man who organized this was a businessman, engineer called Herbert Hoover, managed to arrange for ships to cross warring zones. And in the course of the war, you provided and transported over 6 million tons of food. 6 million tons. And even to this day, this is the largest ever humanitarian project in the history of mankind. You did it, and sadly, you've largely forgotten about it. So today, please go away and think about it and be very, very proud of what America, a young America, did. Now, not just the creation of the army is remarkable, but it's the men who that army then proceeded to create. They're not just men like Jack Barclay, here from Kansas City, who I think fought one of the most extraordinary actions in the First World War. You can read all about it in the museum, but it is a remarkable action. But there were so many other men of your history of the 20th century. Men like MacArthur, Patton, Rickenbacker, Franklin Roosevelt, and of course, that local boy who made good and who attributed his success in later life and politics to his time in the army, Harry S. Truman. Your industry, your energy of the 20th century comes from the First World War. It's a war that required all your energies, all your concentration, and you gave all of that and more to the world. It was an extraordinary performance, and the world has looked to you ever since for that leadership and that sense of purpose and justice which you showed during the First World War. Now, there's no doubt about it. There will be future wars. There will be future memorial days where honour will be paid to the missing and those that have died in the previous year. Now, in the First World War, your casualties were 120,000 servicemen and women who died. Not all died in the war. Some died through illness and accidents, but 120,000 people gave of their lives. As I said, they gave their tomorrows for our todays. So, in closing, I'd like to read the words of a British soldier who served throughout the First World War and paid the following tribute, and I think it's a tribute you can pay to any soldier of any battlefield, of any war. They sleep, many of them, in the uplands of France. They asked for no reward, no sunlit fields of heaven. They played a man's part and held their heads high till death came in a roaring whirlwind and one more little hour was played. Yet, perhaps as they sleep, they hear a voice across the ages. Well done.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you for those powerful reminders and words to us, and thank you for your partnership in preserving the story of World War I and your partnership with the museum. It's our tradition here to, we join with many others in recognising the separate branches of the armed forces through song. And so now we'd invite the 1st Infantry Division Woodwind Band to perform the Armed Forces Medley. And for those of you who are veterans, stand to be recognised when your anthem is played. Well, thank you. In a moment, we will close our program with the removal of the POW MIA cover and a benediction followed by taps performed by Staff Sergeant Stanmore Hines from Fort Riley, Kansas. And in the First Division, Woodwinds Band will continue to play for a little while, and we invite you to stay and listen to that if you'd like. But friends, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing part of your Memorial Day weekend with us. We'd invite you back to the museum and memorial. Take in the wonderful grounds. Spend time with your family in the parkland. I see it as Kansas City's front porch, as really the Hyde Park or the Central Park of Kansas City. Bring your friends here. Spend some time with this exhibition. That'll be up through the summer. We invite veterans and active duty personnel today to experience the museum at no charge. And for the rest of us, it's half price today. We're so grateful to the Kansas City's Mayor Ethnic Enrichment Commission, who welcomed us with the flags as we entered in. To US Bank for their sponsorship, 810 Sports Radio, the City of Kansas City Neighborhood Tourism Development Fund, the Armed Forces Insurance, and donors to the National World War I Museum and Memorial. Despite having the name as being national, we've got all the glory but no federal funds. So your gifts and support to us is what makes all the difference to help us to ensure that every story is remembered. We'd invite you especially to come back during the week from Father's Day on, where for that 1 week we have taps at the tower. A really very moving, brief ceremony at sunset at about 8:45 each evening for that week beginning June 18 here. We'd invite you to be a part of that. So ladies and gentlemen, now we invite you to stand to remove your covers and for us to experience and honor the POW MIA cover being removed, followed by the benediction, followed by taps.
Just as the great rivers, when they reach the ocean, cease to be separate and become simply the ocean, so let us reach our ocean and come together as one. As we return to our homes, let us do so as one people, one community, and one nation. And let us all remain mindful of the history we share and what our veterans endured and what was given to make it so. Let us embrace the history we have with respect and due reverence, and embrace the present we have with honor and humility, knowing what was required to make it what it is, what was endured, and let us receive the gifts our forebears have given us. Let us do this together. Amen.